Hello and welcome to the Solo Coach Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to those who feel called to take the path less followed. On this show, you'll find a mixture of solo and interview episodes covering all topics associated with personal development and living your best ever life. To find out more, visit thesolocoach.co.uk, at the Solo Coach on Insta, or David the Solo Coach on LinkedIn. And now for this week's episode. Enjoy the show. Good morning, Helen.
Hello, how are you doing?
Absolutely brilliant. Yourself?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Me too. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So for everyone listening, to introduce you, Helen ONeill is a portfolio career specialist, a future of work coach, a multi-published author, and founder and host of the Coach Right podcast. Through her business, Coach Right, Helen helps coaches to turn their expertise into published pages and is a font of knowledge on all things book writing and publishing, which we're going to learn a lot more about today. Helen actually reached out to me back last year on LinkedIn and we connected through a mutual interest in solo travel. And since then, I've attended one of Helen's fantastic Coach Right workshops where we learnt about how to write the book with our heart and sell the book with our heads, along with questions to ask ourselves and some useful tools to assist us on our writing journey. So, Helen, to get us started, I'd love to ask you what lights you up about what you do now?
Oh, brilliant opening question, David. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's so funny, isn't it? Because we connected over our love of travel and then quickly found that we also have other shared loves in the terms of coaching and all things books. And it's so funny because I think when you set out on your coach's journey, you look for what your niche is going to be. And there, everybody says, don't they? They're like, you need to niche down. The riches are in the niches, which is a horrible phrase, but it's all there. But ultimately, we don't start coaching because of any of those things. We start coaching because we want to help people, we want to serve. And I absolutely love my core practice, supporting people with kind of navigating the complexity of having a portfolio career. But what I didn't realize is there's actually a niche within that niche, which is what we're talking about when we talk about Coach Right, because by definition, coaches that are writing books and becoming authors have portfolio careers because they've got multiple streams of income. So bringing my love of books, my love of coaching, and my love of portfolio careers all together into one space is the thing that lights me up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Helen. And I know you speak with such genuine love. You really speak from the heart when you talk about what you do and your enjoyment of it. And it's clear throughout all our conversations and when we met on your workshop again, how much you really do enjoy this.
Mm.
Um, can you tell us more about how you came to have the portfolio career that you have now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, very quick potted history of my background. I did the traditional corporate thing. So, 25 years in corporate, working way up the ladder, worked for lots of big organizations with brand names that you'd recognize. And it was super fun. You know, I met loads of cool people, got to go to loads of interesting places, got to do lots of challenging things. And then if I was awake, I was at work. And I think you get to a stage in your career when you're working somewhere like that where you go, actually, I love what I do. I just don't want to do it all of the time. So I had always wanted to be a writer growing up, but of course you go and get a proper job in inverted commas. And I sort of went, well, what would happen actually if I downscaled my job just a little bit and freed up a bit of time to have a go at this creative writing lark? So that's what I did. And that was brilliant. I wrote my first book. I had a job that was slightly less senior, a bit closer to home, freed up some time. And I had this lovely kind of blend between corporate and creative. Then there was the pandemic, which was good times. And that threw everything up in the air again. And that's where coaching entered my life. So I retrained to be a coach and quickly realized that actually that was going to be the next season of my life, looking at how I can support people on their own development journeys. And so that led me to eventually what is my portfolio career today. So I still do a little bit of work in the change management space on a fractional basis. I do one-to-one coaching with portfolio professionals, and I support coaches who want to write books. And of course, the all-important pillar, which is I'm still an author myself. So currently working on my fifth manuscript.
Wow, thank you so much, Helen, for that storyline there, that timeline of events. When you mentioned your 25-year corporate career, and I love the line, when I was awake, if I was awake, I was at work. It got me thinking about values. I know we talk a lot in coaching about values. I'm wondering what leads people to sort of have that shift, almost like that awakening in their career where they think, I'm not sure this is what I want anymore. I think I want something different. Do you think it's that our core values change, or that what we prioritize changes, or is it something else that's going on for people?
I think it's probably all of the above, in all honesty. So there's a phrase that I talk about sometimes when I'm talking about people's careers where, we've all become used to the fact that a job for life isn't really a thing anymore. And but actually the reason for that is that jobs change and the environment that we have our careers in is changing too. So jobs for life were perfect when you would spend your whole career building skills within that particular framework. Now, skills need a refresh every 3 to 5 years. So there's a skills aspect in actually, are we looking to do something different? Those organizations that we're working within will have changed. What we want will have changed. Sometimes those things just don't connect anymore. Sometimes it's nobody's fault, but actually it's no longer a match. And like you say, sometimes there is value. So if we go and look at organizational change, organizations are finding that change tough too, right? So they have to adapt to survive. And some of the choices they make in order to do that might not align with our personal values. Similarly, I suppose you've also got, lifestyle changes. So, changes in terms of partnerships, family, friends, so on and so forth, aspirations. So it's a very quick kind of round answer to say all of the above.
I really like that answer, Helen, because what you didn't say, which I think people sometimes perceive, you didn't say something has gone wrong. Something's gone
Mm,
wrong in that organization. Something's gone wrong for that individual. I think often when what we used to enjoy and what we used to do no longer kind of feels right and no longer fits the bill, we perceive it straight away as something's gone wrong, either with my boss, my company, my job, my career, or me, myself. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And I think we can quite easily, I'm definitely guilty of this, jump on that something's gone wrong. How do we fix it?
mm.
Versus actually, this is kind of a natural process of change and evolution. And maybe nothing's gone wrong at all. I've just,
Yeah,
I don't know, outgrown the role.
yeah, yeah. And things do, don't they? I mean, we evolve as people, organizations evolve as organizations. Why would we expect that those two things would always want to coexist? And there's no blame at that. It's just that's just the nature of it. I think the thing that we possibly are all starting to be aware that we need to be more focused on is being on the front foot with that. So the challenge that we quite often find is that you might find yourself in an environment that you feel is toxic to you. And that's normally a signal that it's a values misalignment, right? So,
Mm.
actually, how can we get to a place where we can see that coming? We can see that change either in ourselves or in the organization and move earlier. Because what is awful is being in an environment where we feel like we don't belong, we feel like we're not valued, we feel like we don't want to be there anymore, and having to move from a place of scarcity rather than from a place of abundance. And that's quite difficult. Those are skills that we talk about when we think about future of work coaching is how can we be on that constant curiosity, constant personal development kind of cycle, and always having one look out for what's next.
That's interesting, Helen. I know I've got certain clients that I've worked with in the past who have fallen into the trap of waiting for things to
Mm,
get better, waiting for things to change, wondering if I just stay a little longer, will it get better? Will things change? Versus if I pull out now, if I leave now, will I regret that decision? Should I stay or should I go completely? Should I try and change roles within the same organization? It's like it's overwhelming the amount of options, and sometimes the easiest option is to not take any of them and just
mm.
stay where we are. But then the longer we stay where we are, the more trapped we can feel and the more difficult it can be to make that change.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I've had similar conversations with clients in the past. And one of the things I recommend is to time box that decision, because it's almost like you don't have to decide to stay or to decide to go in that moment. Sometimes what you need to do is say, well, it might get better. Actually, I'm miserable now. I'm not happy now. I'm feeling discontented now. What if I put a note in my diary for 3 months' time and I say, okay, I'm just going to see whether this is a blip or I'm going to see whether or not this is something I can take action on. And then when you get to that note in your diary, you will know, oh yeah, I still feel like that. Right, okay, that's the action decision made. Or, oh yeah, no, actually, that's fine. That's the stay decision made. And that takes the uncertainty out of it for people sometimes.
I like that. That feels a little bit like the principle of adding something to your shopping basket.
Yeah,
If you're not sure you want it, leaving it 24, 48 hours and then coming back to it to work out, do I really want that thing or was it just an impulsive buy?
exactly, for sure.
And I have to ask you, Helen, while we're on the topic of careers, a future of work coach, I've got to ask a future of work coach, what what does the future of work look like, in your
Oh,
opinion?
yeah, if we had a crystal ball, what would it say? And
Yeah.
that's the difficult thing, isn't it? Nobody really knows. But what does seem to be coming through loud and clear is we are in a human skills focused time. So while we're in a digital revolution and we're all talking about AI, you can't have a single conversation without talking about AI at least once. And, there's new tools coming out every other day. Actually what we're increasingly seeing is it's the differential is the human skill. So we used to call these soft skills back in the day, didn't we? It was the how can we build relationships with people and connections with people on a human to human level. I know you're really passionate about helping people to build their confidence in building those networks, both in a group environment and in a one-to-one environment. So those sorts of skills, the resiliency skills that we need. Burnout isn't contagious. It is a direct result of how we work. So, how can we learn to work in a way that doesn't put us in a position where we're burning out? And, we've all walked that tightrope in one way, shape, or form. So, increasingly, future of work coaching is about doubling down on being human.
Thanks, Helen. And I know that having read your story on your website, on your About page, which I would recommend anyone listening to definitely have a look at, you talk about how you walked the tightrope of burnout, I believe, during the pandemic. I'm wondering how you knew you were walking that tightrope and how you were able to get off it before you fell off it.
Yeah, God, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think, again, you need to learn to listen to your body again. So for me personally, and I do say personally because this isn't me telling other people what to do. I find things like having devices that record how I sleep and how many steps I've done and that kind of thing disconnects me from how I'm feeling as a person. So I don't have those kind of trackers. And I'll tell you for why. I used to have one. And the first thing I used to do in the morning was I would wake up and I would check my watch to see how tired I was. And I suddenly realized, well, hang on a minute, why don't I just listen to my body and learn how tired I am and then learn what I need to do in order to not be tired? So for me, that first step again is connecting with how you feel so that you're recognizing, am I running on adrenaline? Because that's exciting. We've got all this energy and we're like, this is great. Or am I running on cortisol? which is not so great and is like, oh, I'm dragging myself to my computer, I'm keeping going, I'm feeling this constant kind of low level anxiety. So first of all, recognizing, and then second of all, understanding what we need to do in terms of rest. So there's a lot of research and writing around the different types of rest. So absolutely, sometimes we do just need to lay on the sofa and watch TV for an hour, and that's absolutely fine. Sometimes we need to get outside in nature and move our bodies and get fresh air and green space. Sometimes we need to spend time with people. Sometimes we need to spend time away from a digital device. So there's all these different ways that we can kind of re-energize our bodies, and learning what you need and when, I think, is absolutely vital to helping steer away from burnout.
Gosh, that's so true, Helen. I like that. And another form of rest I'd add from my own perspective, one I've learned that I need probably only in the last 12 months, is sometimes what I really need is a monotonous, boring, repetitive task
Mm,
for my kind of monkey brain to um, to focus on and do, but without me needing to put too much cognitive thought and energy
yeah,
into it. And those sort of tasks enable me to relax in a way that I wasn't aware of before.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Who would have thought that like cleaning could be rest? Painting falls into that, like if I've decorated a room,
I have.
I actually find that restful. I enjoy doing that. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't. I take my time over it, so you can spend a few hours and then come back to it. But it's a great way to kind of switch your brain off and like let your mind intellect on things. No.
Definitely. I had a client I was working with about a year ago, and he got very burnt out as a senior leader in a big corporation, loads of pressure, money, yes, but my goodness, it came at a
Mm,
cost. And he actually took 6 months out of that career entirely and worked with his friend who was a decorator and spent 6 months decorating. And he said it was the best thing I ever did because he was just all day long, all he had to focus on was the brush, the paint, and just doing a good job and not spilling the paint everywhere.
yeah.
But he said it just enabled him to properly switch off and come down from being, high alert and kind of in fight or flight mode all day long every day and running on that adrenaline. But it reached a point where he couldn't keep doing that. So
Mm,
he didn't need a yoga retreat. He didn't need months of kind of sat by the sea in a deck chair. What he needed was something else to focus on that he could just do with his hands practically. And I was
yeah.
intrigued by that.
Yeah, for sure. I also quite like creative rest. So again, sort of looping back to how you and I first met, travel for me is a form of rest too. Going somewhere that you've never been before. I love to go somewhere alone. Sometimes, it's great going with friends and family, absolutely. But there's something quite special about a solo trip when you just go somewhere, just you, your own itinerary, and just, completely different environment, completely different people, and you get, oh, I find particularly that is incredibly energizing.
I agree. And interestingly, when I went solo traveling, one of the great things that I found and discovered was how much I enjoyed writing. Um,
Ah,
And I was writing a blog. I was traveling under the blog name A Midlander Abroad, and I was writing blog articles for every place I went to. And sometimes I was writing up the stories that the locals had told me, or a story of some of the experiences I've been through. And I found that whole process very cathartic, very therapeutic, very enjoyable. And I attracted loads of attention, friends, family, friends of friends, who were then avidly awaiting the next installment of my blog, but I had no intention of it ever going, ever getting past, my parents and just my kind of close friend circle. But it did. And that was very interesting.
mm. Yeah, because people love to read all about people's adventures, don't they? It's that behind the scenes section. It's almost like, I always say to people, one of the hardest things to write when you're writing your book is your about page. Because actually, and I don't know about you, but I always read the about page in people's books because I'm fascinated by what they've done in their careers, how they've come to writing, what else they've written. And then there's always little nuggets, isn't there, in their personal life around kind of something that they've thrown in just as a kind of hint of what they're like as a person. And we love that. We love to pull the curtain behind and see what's behind as to how people live their lives and the experiences that they have, for sure.
100%. And it's always interesting to read the acknowledgements page as well. I'm a little bit sad I do that because not only do I like to read how heartfelt it is and how much love is being projected by the author towards everyone who's helped him or her write their book,
Yeah.
it just reminds you that something that you perceive as a solo venture, writing a book, still takes a whole load of people
Mm.
to get across the line. And it's not such a simple and easy process as people might think.
And again, I always say to people when they're starting to write their book for the first time is no matter how you're going to keep everything together, if you're a Word document kind of person, if you use a specialized tool, if you like to handwrite, have a page somewhere where you jot down who you want to say thank you to. Because again, you tend to write your acknowledgement page right at the end when you've finished your book. And you don't want to forget anybody. So it's actually like you feel quite a bit of pressure at the end, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been on this journey writing this book for, let's say, a year, 18 months. So as I'm going, I always keep little notes of like, oh yeah, I need to make sure I mention that person and this is why. And then when you come to write it at the end, it's like a lovely reflective activity of gratitude.
Definitely, definitely. I know someone will be listening to this show who's the Queen of Gratitude, Zoe Bishop, and she'll be loving it. So shout out to Zoe and gratitude, and the power of appreciation. But seeing as we're naturally on the topic of book writing, I'm intrigued by your niche, which is um, supporting coaches in particular
Mm.
to write books. How did that come about, Helen?
Completely by accident, in all honesty. So I had set up my coaching practice and I had brought together my background in change management, HR, recruitment. I was like, yeah, I'm going to help people with their careers. And then that quickly morphed into supporting people with portfolio careers because I had multiple streams of income and there were lots of people that were asking me about all that kind of stuff. So it's like, brilliant, I've nailed my niche, happy days. And then, of course, I started to build my network in the coaching community because that's how you learn and grow professionally. And I was talking to all these other coaches and I was saying, oh, like I'm a writer and published, a couple of books since I launched my practice and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh, I'd like to write a book. And then there were all these reasons why they couldn't. So there was, some of these were limiting beliefs around kind of capability or time or um, kind of not understanding the process. Some of these were around gatekeepers and misconceptions around different routes to publishing and just information that they didn't have available to them. And of course, when you are faced with that sort of situation, when you're a coach, you have to do something about it, don't you? So I was like, oh, I'm going to have to debug some of these myths. And so Coach White was really just a bit of an experiment originally to say, I can't find another space that is just for coaches who are looking to write books. There are lots of people who provide kind of book midwife type services or kind of programs for entrepreneurs looking to write business books, but there was nothing specifically for coaches. And I'm sure you'll agree when you get a group of coaches in a room, the energy is different. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I wonder what it would be like if we just created that room. And and it's been brilliant. It's been sort of just under 6 months since that experiment started. I've run my signature program, Coach Right 90, twice since then. So we're halfway through cohort two. Um, and and it seems to be exactly what people need. So it's sort of a bit of a blend between coaching and mentoring in the program itself. And then obviously I just want to make sure people have got the information they need. So there's a podcast that anyone can listen to. There's a blog, there's a free newsletter that people can get, and people can kind of dot in and out where depending on what they need fundamentally.
Thanks, Helen. And I really like how you described so honestly how your niche came about. It would have been so easy to say, oh, I had an epiphany, I had that eureka moment where I realized this is what I need to do. Because I think we all hope that it's going to happen like that,
Yeah,
but in reality, it doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes it's an idea, and like you say, you felt called to. I've got to do something about this. Can't let this pass me by as a coach, and then you responded to it. You did it as a test, as an experiment. Love that choice of phrase there, and look where it's got you. And it could have equally gone the other way and not worked at all and never become a thing. So thank you for leaning into that on behalf of all the people who work with you and all the coaches, myself included, because the energy in that space of your workshop, it was a bit like going back to coach training when we were all there
yeah,
for a similar reason. And there was a bit of a kind of unspoken knowing between us all of why we're there, what we're about, and why we do what we do in the first place. Because typically most coaches have that kind of we want to help people
yeah.
in common, but yeah, it's yeah. So thank you, thank you for that.
And you've got, I think I remember you saying you think people have got three books in them. What books have you got in you?
Thank you for filling in with a question when I didn't have one there. Um, What three books have I got in me? Well, it's interesting. We spoke about obstacles, didn't we, on the workshop? Obstacles to getting started writing. I want to write a book for the same reason I want to do a TED talk. It's on my vision board, it's on my plan. I don't want to leave this life without having done both of those things.
Mm,
But my obstacle for a while has been I'll wait until I've got something really profound and unique and that the world has never seen or heard before to say, and then I'll do a TED talk and write a book. But the problem is that that might not ever happen. So I've realized I'm going to have to lean into it and
yeah,
just see, embark on that journey, take the first step and see where I get to, which you in the workshop helped me with that. But in terms of what books I've got in me, not entirely sure. Not entirely sure, really. I mean, I'm a absolutely lover of stories. Would love to share my story because I always think if I share something and it helps one person that's perhaps in a similar position to me, perhaps can relate to something that I've been through or done or found out, then then it's worth it. And if it reaches more than one person, then it's super worth it. So definitely, I know I need to start, but particularly what or where to start, still working on that one.
yeah. It's so true. Everybody starts in the same place as well, which is always why I ask that question. And it's amazing how many people that I speak to who have published who say, if this book just helps one person, then my work here is done. And of course, it doesn't help just one person, it helps lots more than one person. And so that's lovely. And there is something quite magical about getting a review from somebody that you don't know or an email from somebody that says, this thing that you wrote, that made a difference in my life. And it's just such a magical moment.
It's interesting you mentioned your Coach Write podcast, and people have lots of different reasons for wanting to write a
Mm,
book, a bit like they have lots of different excuses for not starting. Um, and I was listening to one of your episodes yesterday, and it was someone you were interviewing who was saying how writing a book has been such a journey of self-development and it's been like
mm,
therapeutic. And I was so intrigued by that, and I wanted to ask you, as well as that gentleman you're interviewing, what have been some of the positive effects you've seen on people who have written books and perhaps unexpected um,
mm.
results that they've got for themselves from the book writing and authoring and publishing process?
Yeah, gosh, so many reasons. So the first thing a lot of people get is just knowing that they can. Because there's some kind of mystique, isn't there, around authorship? It's like, oh, I'm a writer, I'm an author, I'm a published author, and I can hold my book in my hands. And there's something um, quite magical in when you step over the space of being a writer, and you are a writer as soon as you put pen to paper. And then you step into that book being published and available to buy, and then you're an author. And that, like, from an identity perspective, there's a shift. And so feeling that shift is a big change. Also, depending on what people are actually writing, there is normally a trend, and most of the people that I work with are writing non-fiction. So we're looking at a transformation for a reader. that takes place within that book. And quite often, the author will go through a similar transformation as well. Um, and part of that, I think, is because you spend so much time with that content and deepening your expertise in that content, which is fascinating when I speak to coaches who are converting their academic writing into mainstream books too. So, a lot of the coaches that I've spoken to, they are turning PhDs or masters into academic or mainstream books. And they're like, but I did all this primary research. And what I hadn't expected was that actually writing a book for a different audience was going to deepen my expertise still further. So that's an interesting one too. And then I suppose the last one is commerciality. Again, a lot of coaches start out sort of saying, like we have done, I just want to help people. I just want to write a book and help a person. And actually, they're quite surprised that the book can help remove the marketing ick because you've got something to talk about. You can come on a podcast and you can talk about a specific book. You can go onto LinkedIn and you can post about something that you've researched for your book. And it can open doors for speaking opportunities and for workshops, and so on and so forth. So again, that doesn't happen by magic. There's work that has to go on behind the scenes with that, but that's quite often an unexpected outcome too.
I love what you said there, Helen, about, and I can so totally relate to having something to talk about other than yourself. Because I was
Mm.
talking in a networking event the other day, and we were saying a networking event to be easier if you weren't allowed to talk about yourself and you had to talk about one specific other person, because marketing and advertising and promoting something that's not yourself is so much easier than promoting yourself, because your imposter syndrome maybe gets in the way, a bit of self-doubt, a bit of awkwardness, a bit of big-headedness, fear of coming across really egotistical. Lots of complicated things happen when you're trying to promote yourself that don't happen as much when you're trying to promote someone else. In my example, I've found it a lot easier to talk about the podcast at networking events and to wax lyrical about all the wonderful guests I've had on my podcast than to talk specifically about my coaching that's my own individual product, because it feels a little bit like, bigging myself up, which is typically, I think, particularly in English culture, British culture, not something that we are taught to do and encouraged to do from a young age. We're more encouraged for like humbleness and maybe making a few jokes at your own expenses and not getting too big for your boots.
Yeah, yeah. And so the other thing with coaching is there are so many coaches that are in that hustle space right now. So there's, again, if you open your social media platform of choice, there will be, you need coaching because of this. This is wrong. You're broken in this way, and coaching will help fix you. Da, 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 all that kind of um, copy and paste content that's like hustle, hustle, hustle. And for a lot of us, that isn't how we want to run our businesses. So then you sort of got this sort of dividing line between the people that want to be quieter and professional development focused and anti-hustle. And again, no judgment on either business model, by the way, if that's what works for people and that's what fills their book, absolutely. But I know that the clients that I work with are quite anti that approach, because what they're looking for, regardless of whether they're a coach looking to write a book or whether they're a professional looking at a portfolio career, is they want sustainability and they want a life that is crafted to serve all of them. And so they are coming to me not as a broken human being, not with something wrong with them that's stopping them achieving what they want, as somebody who is just wants to work through the detail in order to move themselves forward. And again, that's just a very different approach, I think.
Yes. Thank you, Helen. I wondered if I could loop back a little bit to what you said in the previous answer about that identity shift that
Mm.
happens for people as they're writing a book. Because I know that in coaching, you initially start out as, oh, I'm training as a coach, I'm in coach training. And then a kind of a shift has to happen for you
Yeah.
to then, and it took a while for me to identify as I am a coach, full stop. I'm not coaching training, I'm not learning it, I'm not practicing it. I am doing it, I am it. It is me. And I'm wondering what happens in that identity shift of someone going from I do a bit of writing, I write a few posts, oh I'm having a go at writing a book, to then I'm a writer slash I am an author.
Yeah. I think it's just it's quite difficult to explain a feeling in words, but there is a feeling that you get when you hold a physical book in your hands that you have produced. And you will, regardless of how people choose to publish, you will normally get a proof copy at some point during the way. So there will be a book mail point where you get a little envelope through your door, and you normally, if you'll remember to record it for posterity, that's always worth doing too. And then you open your book and then you can see what it looks like, and you can hold it and you can feel it. And I think for a lot of us, it's been a dream for such a long time. Like I wanted to be an author when I was a child, and yet I was in my 30s before I published my first book. And so to it going from being a dream that you've always had, and we do dream about these things. Everybody that wants to be an author has that dream when they go to bed and they're like, oh, imagine what it'd be like to walk into a bookshop and see someone buying my book, or just see my book on the shelf, or, to see my book on an online retailer. And so when it's not a dream anymore and it's a reality, it's that's the shift. But how to articulate this to what that feels like, it's practically impossible. You have to experience it.
And I'm sure it feels differently depending on who you are, at what point that your
Mm,
career you're at, or if it's
yeah,
your
for
perhaps your
sure.
first book, second book, third book. But I'm sure for everyone it feels magical. That this thing that you've created and you've given life. Because I know a lot of the work we do as a coach, you can't really touch it and feel it and hold it in your hands. But
Mm.
when you get some, I don't know, some merchandise with your logo on, I've got a coaster here,
Oh,
and
I love
then
that.
your first box of business cards, I remember it being so exciting taking the cellophane off the box. We didn't make an unboxing video, we should have done, but I was like opening it up and then holding one in my hand and watching it glisten in the light. It's like this is real. This is something
Mm.
that's tactile that represents me, my business, my logo, my email address at the bottom. And yeah, it's hard to describe really, but it just felt special and it felt more real than just, I've got social media set up, I've got a website set up, but it's not tangible. I can't give it to, I can't put it in someone else's hand.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite strange when someone asks you to sign your book as well for the first time. That's quite a special moment too.
A bit like being asked for an autograph.
Yes, it is. Oh yeah, who shall I make it out to? It's very exciting.
I wish I could say, yeah, I know what that feels like.
You will. And the other thing, again, you'll have heard me say this before, but once you have the germ of an idea, I always say just lean into it because it will happen. The ideas are everywhere. The calling to write a book isn't going to stop calling you. It's still going to be there. And so, as you say, it's first of all accepting that that is going to happen, and just doing a little bit towards it as and when you can to start with. There's lots of advice out there about write every day or go on a writing retreat or whatever. But ultimately, let the idea germinate, sit down, write some words, see if you want to write some more.
I love that. I love that. I'll get the same with the podcast. I'll have an idea for an episode, and then maybe I'll ignore the idea for a while, or then I'll eventually it'll get louder and it'll start as a whisper, then it'll be a spoken word, and it'll almost become a shout or even a scream before I actually start writing some notes to do a solo episode or a Toastmaster speech or a podcast guest. If I'm speaking to someone having a great conversation, it happened just the other day, really close friend who's been through some incredible transitions in his life. And I just as I was talking to him, I had that out of body experience of David, this person's story needs to go public, which is why I do the podcast for many reasons. You know, I need to share this with the world. I need to put this person, I need to put them in front of a mic. I need to set up the recording and I need to, this message needs to go out there because they're so inspiring. I feel so moved by them. I can really relate to what they're saying and they're actually saying it really, really well. And they don't realize how much experience, how much their experience is relevant, how good of a speaker they are, how good of a storyteller they are. So I know it's going to do wonders for their confidence as well. But most importantly, it has the potential to help one person. And as soon as I get that tick, I'm like, right, I've got to do it. I've got to do it. It's got to happen.
Absolutely. And just like a podcast, again, people sometimes worry that they've got to have the idea. It's like, oh, I've got to have the perfect idea that I'm then going to write the perfect book, and that's going to be the thing. And like ideas for podcasts, like just because you've committed to one idea doesn't mean that more aren't going to come along the next day. So choose one, choose one that you feel that you can spend 6 to 12 months with, because it will take 6 to 12 months to write your book, and just commit to that book and write it. You don't have to publish it if you don't want to. You don't have to edit it if you don't want to. Just treat it as an experiment, to go back to what we said before. And then there'll always be the next one that you can write again and again and again and again. And then just get started.
And on that note, Helen, I wanted to ask you the question for any sort of budding writers out there who are listening in, maybe coaches, maybe not coaches, but they're struggling very much like the position I've been in for a few years of knowing where to start. And they can open a Word document and look at the cursor flashing away, and then that's maybe as far as they've got. And perhaps they've, again, using myself as an example, perhaps they've opened that document many times or even tried writing a title and then closing it. What advice would you give to someone who's got that kind of, I don't know, blank page syndrome,
Mhm.
wants to start but doesn't know where or how to actually start in writing a book?
So, one of the activities that we do in the program is writing a letter to your reader. So, imagine that you want to help one person, imagine who that person is, and imagine that you're writing a letter to them. And then sit down again with a computer, with a pen and paper if you want, and just write them a letter and explain to them what you want from for them, and explain to them why you're going to write them a book, and explain to them how you're going to take them on the journey from where they are now, because you understand where they are now and you understand where they want to go, and walk them through the steps, really high level of what you're going to help them with. And most people doing that activity actually end up with quite a long letter. They actually end up with sort of 2 or 3 thousand words. And nearly always the framework for your book will be in that letter.
Oh, so a letter to your future reader or your
Mm,
ideal reader.
yeah, absolutely.
I love that, Helen. It sounds a bit like the ideal client profiling that we do in business marketing and branding exercises, trying to work out who our ideal client is and what their challenges are, what solutions
Yeah.
they might need, what language they might use. And it even translates really well over to Toastmasters. Well, I was reading some of the documentation yesterday on how to build a speech, and Toastmasters doesn't recommend just start with your introduction. It recommends a step before that, which is to
Mm,
write down what's the key message or the purpose of your
yeah.
speech. In one line, what's it like? What's your speech? Why are you giving this speech? What's the reason for it in a nutshell? And then the second question is, why should it matter to your audience?
Mm.
Why will it matter? Um, and then the third question was, um, I should never give myself lists because I always get two or three in and then forget.
Same.
The third question was, it was along the lines of, oh yes, what's the one piece of information you want them to go away with?
Mm,
What's the
yeah.
one thing you want them to remember from your speech? And if you start with those, what's the purpose of your speech? Why should it matter to your audience? And what's that one takeaway you want them to have? Then chances are the body of your speech, the key message of your speech is in there. Then you
Mm,
can extract it, and you're not starting from a blank page because you've already taken like some pre-speech writing steps. You've done that activity beforehand that then you can keep thinking back to and coming back to while
mm.
you're writing your speech, which sounds similar to the
Very
writing
similar.
activity that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is just demystifying the process a little bit, isn't it? Because actually, a full length book is intimidating to anybody. Of course, it is. But a full length book is made up of chapters and sections and paragraphs. And actually, you only need to write one word at a time. So if you can create some sort of map for yourself, some sort of again, to use coaching framing, some sort of model for yourself. We all learn coaching models. How often do we kind of flex a little bit between those models in real life? Of course we do, but it's a semi-structure there that helps us move forward. And once you've got that, then it's not so terrifying because you're like, okay, well, actually, from this letter, I can see that my person is going to start here and they're going to want to get to here, and here are 7, 8 things that I can talk about that would form potentially chapters. Okay, well, let's start filling in what I know about those chapters. And okay, maybe I just start with chapter 1 or chapter 7, depending on how you like to work. Some people work in order, some people like to patchwork, and just see what happens.
So there's more than one. There's many more than one way to start. There's lots of
There.
different ways to start, and I know from listening to your podcasts, I think someone even started with the acknowledgements,
Mm,
starting right at the end and then working backwards.
yeah.
So there's no one size fits all. There's yeah, they say there's many ways to skin a cat. There's lots of ways to write a book. Clearly,
Very much so. Yeah. And everybody, and again, people are fascinated by other people's processes because everybody does it slightly differently. And what you'll find is if you write more than one book, I write every book slightly differently. So the book that I'm working on now is much more of a patchwork than it was. So I'm writing about resilience at the moment, and I created a framework to talk about resilience, which actually I now deliver a course about as well. And then I kind of filled in all the research and I found some case studies. And so I ended up with all of these kind of sections of sort of 500 to 1,000 words. And then all of that sort of needs to be stitched together. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, is going, okay, so how can I make this into a narrative that takes somebody on a journey and is interesting? And also, like, some sections have got more than others in them. So how can I even that out so that it's a better reader experience for people? Never written like that before, but it's kind of fun.
and it's working for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You do have to make sure you don't go off on a tangent there and keep doing research. That's the difficult thing. Somebody said that to me in one of the first workshops I ran, and we talk about why people were looking to write and the kind of purpose behind it. And someone said, a great reason for wanting to write is it's a brilliant excuse to read and learn. And I was like, oh, so true. Because what a wonderful way to just go, oh, I need to learn everything there is about this thing so that I can have an opinion on it and I can share what I've learned with others. Brilliant gift, brilliant reason to write a book.
That's a fabulous reason. I know that the reason that appeals to me, again from a recent episode of your podcast, was that a gentleman talking about the self-healing journey
Mm.
he'd been on and that personal development. And I'm a kind of a personal development junkie. I'm into anything that means that I can get better and I can grow and I can improve. And the idea of, as we know, the power of journaling, the power of writing things down and getting them off your chest. Um, that really appeals to me. The potential of, if I write all of this down, if I think back through it all and I piece it all together, maybe there'll be some answers to some questions I've had for a long time within that book. Even if I never release it and no other pair of eyes other than my own ever reads this book, then it's worth doing for that reason alone, from my perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. The first book I wrote was a fiction title, and nobody has ever read it. And I wrote it just to see if I could write full length. And that was the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book was to see if I could and to learn. And as a story, it's fine. Is it the best written book in the world? No. Could I probably edit it and put it out into the world? Probably. Am I going to? No. For me, it was my apprenticeship and that served its purpose, and that's okay.
So again, a bit like with Coach Wright, it was an experiment,
Mhm.
and it was a successful experiment.
Yeah,
And even though it might never ever be published or read by anyone other than yourself, that's okay because it served its purpose.
absolutely. Absolutely. And if without that book, I wouldn't have learned what I learned about structure. I wouldn't have learned what I learned about editing. And now I know those things and I'm able to apply them and help other people with them. So it did exactly what it needed to do.
Thanks, Helen. And talking about new experiences, leaning into something new that you haven't perhaps haven't done before. Um, I wanted to just ask you about the Coach Right podcast. So I've been listening to a few
Mm.
episodes and really enjoying it. And we've had a few chats about this already. And I just wondered what led you to starting the podcast and how's it gone so far?
Good. So I'm a massive podcast listener, first of all. I love podcasts. I have a very old, small iPod that I download just podcasts onto. So all the podcasts I subscribe to, I put them on that podcast on my little iPod, and I love kind of going for a nice walk and listening to an episode of my favorite show. And when I was starting to think about what coach right would be, I thought, wouldn't it be cool just to ask loads of other coaches what their experiences are? Because I'm conscious that there are lots of different routes to publication. And again, in the nicest possible way, I get to talk to coaches about books. So, it's really fun. So that was fundamentally the reason why. So it's a couple of times a month. And again, I speak to coaches that have been independently published, have worked with partnership publishers, have been academically or traditionally published. And it's just an absolute delight. And yeah, I share a little bit about what's going on in the industry from a coaching perspective and a writing perspective too. And yeah, I love it. I couldn't, if I had more time, I would record episodes every day.
Me too, me too. And what have you learned on the process? I know we had a discussion about sound
Mm.
quality because I'm also learning about that as well from a technical perspective. But what have you learned? Has there been any unexpected learnings along this journey?
Sound quality one's a fascinating one because I'm really paranoid about trying to get the sound to be as good as it possibly can be. And what I've realized is that it's not actually that important to listeners. Which is quite interesting. I think the days of overproduced podcasts are probably done. Um, the introduction is an interesting learning. So I do a brief kind of 10-minute intro around what's going on in my world and that kind of stuff. And then just general musings on writing and coaching. And I did that because a lot of the podcasts that I listen to have that sort of structure. And that's been interesting because I've had a lot of feedback that people really like that. So even if the topic of the interview isn't for them, they might like join just to hear what's going on. So that's quite interesting. And it's also become a little bit of an accountability thing for me. What else have I learned? That consistency is important. So I had purposefully said 2 episodes per month because I have a portfolio career and time is scarce, and it actually takes quite a long time to produce a podcast. And so I committed to twice a month, and I've stuck to twice a month, and that has worked really well. So, again, if people are considering starting a podcast, think about a release schedule that you can deliver upon. And then loads of like random stuff like how to do transcriptions with AI. That was interesting. So I do use AI to help get the show notes ready and to help remove the Z's from the transcriptions and all that kind of stuff, and learning how to do that in a way that helps me get the show out into the world quickly. That was a bit of a learning curve too.
Yeah, I can echo all of your learning curves. I do have had the same experience, and definitely AI as a tool really useful. As a creator, no. With my own ideas for my episodes and with my interviews, I always prepare everything as a human because I kind of want it to be human, and that means it's going to have a few mistakes and a few,
Mm,
accidents in it. But I want it to be real and authentic.
yeah.
But AI post creation, as soon as you've created that episode and recorded it, AI for help with editing and for help with, creating the social media pack, for sharing it with the world and the descriptions for the different platforms has been so very useful and such a
Mm,
massive time saver because ultimately I found the people who are going to listen to it are going to listen to it and the people who aren't interested and won't
yeah.
listen to it. Kind of, so long as the description is good enough, it doesn't need to be the best description on the planet. because the kind of the episode quite literally speaks for itself once you start listening to it. So I've deliberately put more effort into the pre creation phases of the podcast to make it as good as it can be versus the post creation, well,
Mm,
post production activities, let's say, because there's only
yeah.
so many hours in the day.
Oh no, absolutely. And whoever reads like descriptions of podcasts, like you say, you either listen to it because you've stumbled across it, or you might be interested in the topic, but you're not going to be like, oh no, that bullet point on that show description, that's not really for me, so I'm not going to listen. Although transcriptions are very important from a discoverability perspective, but also from an accessibility perspective. So again, while we're sort of talking about more technical lessons learned, I put my podcast on YouTube, and it's audio only, my podcast. And what I realized after a few episodes was that the subtitles didn't show. So the transcript was on the audio only podcatchers, but on YouTube, there wasn't a way to have that there. So I sort of created a banner on the image so that the subtitles could be added. So there's little things like that that you learn as you go, that you can kind of make tweaks um, along the way. But the other thing I'd say that I learned, and again, this shouldn't be a surprise, is just how generous people are with their time and just how willing they are to share their journey to help other people. And that has been so inspirational.
I'm just curious, Helen, on feedback. You mentioned earlier, that people are giving you really good feedback about your intro. I've had a mixture of feedback. Initially, I had a jingle. Someone said, "Oh, it's really loud. Can you quieten it down a bit?" I did, and then had some positive feedback on that. So that was an easy change to make. But then this year, I decided to shift from that jingle at the beginning into like a pre-prepared intro and outro with a little bit of background music, because, like you said earlier, that's what a lot of other podcasters
Yep.
and more professional podcasts are doing as well. But then I've had certain people say, "Oh, I really like your intro, it's really professional." And then other people have said, "Oh, I really miss the jingle." So I've realized that trying to please all of the people
Yeah.
with the podcast doesn't work. And I've had to kind of go with my gut and sacrifice some elements that maybe some people did enjoy in order to, I don't know, do what feels right and keep it fluid, keep it moving forward and kind of keep it evolving.
Mm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. You're not going to please all of the people all the time. So you remember I said I love podcasts, and I set the structure up of the podcast, my podcast, in the way that I like to listen to. And, that's not to say that what I like is better than anybody else. It's just the format that I'm most familiar with and I know works. So, one of the things somebody said to me when I first started, so I'm similar, I have a pre recorded introduction that's very short with a bit of background music that just opens the show, and the same at the end. And someone said to me, "Oh, um, really, you need to make that longer, and you need to be talking all about your services and what you offer there, and really kind of make that sort of 2 or 3 minutes long." And I was like, no, because when I listen to podcasts that do that, I skip forward for that section. Whereas with podcasts that just have something short and snappy, I'm like, da, da, there's the music, there's the person, right, and into the show. And it just sort of separates it between one episode and the next. And that's all it's there for, just so that people know that they're in the Coach White room.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, Helen. When I'm watching YouTube videos or listening to podcasts, my kind of rule of thumb is if it takes longer to find the button to skip through the advert, the bit that you want to
Mm,
skip, if it takes longer to actually do the skip, then I might as well just let it play through. Whereas if I've got 10 minutes of adverts, I'm definitely going to use the skip option.
for sure.
So I think there's definitely a fine balance there for listeners in keeping them engaged and interested, but not repeating the same stuff so that they're having to skip through, which is going to reduce their enjoyment of listening.
Yes,
It's definitely a
absolutely.
balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
And what's your plan? Last question on your podcast. What's your plans for the future? What's your vision for the Coach Right podcast?
Oh, exciting. So we have guests scheduled until the end of June, which is very exciting. So I've got some nice varied stories to be sharing with people, including our first poet,
Ooh.
which again, different type of writing for me. So it was a really interesting episode. That one's coming up next that we've recorded. I'm actually looking to bring in more service providers to the podcast later in the year. So for those that are looking to independently publish, there are lots of reputable organizations that provide, technology tools or printing services and those kind of things. And I think people aren't necessarily aware of what's available. So I want to try and bring a little bit of that into the show too. And then just really want it to continue to grow and be of use to people.
Well, I can't wait to listen to some upcoming episodes, Helen. I've already been enjoying listening to what you've released already. And I think with podcasting, like anything really, consistency is key. And as we put more effort into it, it will continue to grow and people pick up on your intention and your passion. And I always find when you look back on your older episodes, you can always tell that the improvement that's happened in your style, your confidence, how relaxed you are, and then also obviously the quality of the recording and the audio as you've continued to make those little incremental improvements that from episode to episode might not be noticeable, but when you skip 10 episodes ahead, you can definitely see and feel that the difference. So keep going with it. Looking forward to
Yeah, you
hearing more
too. We
episodes.
can keep sharing our learnings as we go. You're a little bit further ahead in the journey than me, so I was always useful to hear your advice too.
Oh, likewise. It's well, yeah, we're all on different journeys and at different points in them. I know you're a lot further ahead on your writing journey than I am, that's for sure. So, in terms of sort of rounding our episode off, if there are people listening out there, and I know there are, who are interested in finding out more, getting in touch with you, where would you recommend they go? What would you recommend they do?
Absolutely. So, from a socials perspective, I'm rubbish at social media except for LinkedIn. So that's the easiest place to find me. O'Neill Helen, I think is my, and I have a Coachwrite podcast, Coachwrite website, which is coachwrite.co.uk for anything coaching and writing related, and HelenONeillCoaching.com for anything portfolio careers related.
And you can get to the podcast from the coachwrite.co.uk website. I'll put links down below in the show notes to everything that you've said. And then final question of today's episode. I like to put people on the spot.
Oh
So here
dear.
goes. If everyone were listening, what would be your message to the world, Helen?
Ooh, everybody listening.
Everybody's listening right now.
Everybody
They're all
listening.
ears.
I would say for everybody listening, if you have a dream that you want to turn into a reality, take one small step towards that dream.
I like that. One small step. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Helen, and participating in towards my dream of building the podcast up, making a positive difference in the world. And would love to have you again back on the show. And maybe one day when I do get around to writing that book, I can
You
come and
will
join
be
you on your
invited and very
podcast.
welcome on the show when you write your book.
Absolutely. Right. I'll get right to that one. Thank you very much, Helen. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a joy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Solo Coach podcast. I've been your host, David Garwood, and you've been my fabulous listener. If you'd like to find out more, check out thesolocoach.co.uk, at the Solo Coach on Insta, and David the Solo Coach on LinkedIn. And if you enjoyed the episode, I would love for you to leave a comment or a review and tell me what you enjoyed most about this week's episode. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.